what I'd like to do now is have 5 minutes for questions. What can all faith groups do that communities start feeling belonging to wider society rather than alienating a particular faith? Can I just say that it was mums who run, but I quite like the idea of nuns who run, particularly as I'm binge watching Call the Midwife, I relate to the party. And I think it has loads to say about these issues. What can all faith groups do that communities start feeling belonging to wider society rather than alienate a particular faith? That makes me think actually of something that's important to say, which is, I think, positioned as Anglican is different from being positioned as Muslim or Hindu or a minority faith in our context. Because Anglicanism is the established faith, it's powerful, although it doesn't think it is. It has all sorts of forms of power in local communities right up to a national political level that other faiths don't have. So if we're talking about power and justice and the way that that pans out, I think it's just important to say that because not all faiths are equal in that sense. If you are part of a minority faith that is responding to forms of injustice and oppression within our context yourself, I think that puts a different spin on it. That may be frustration, but it's also just the way things are. It gives bishops an incredible amount of power, but also responsibility in terms of the messages they are conveying about inclusion and about people's inherent value and about how our context should work.
Thanks, I'm really grateful for that question, really. So just one little story that relates to Alison's mums or nuns who go on the run. I'm also aware of another group in the USA called CrossFit. And CrossFit particularly gathers women in pre- and postnatal care situations who otherwise would be alone, living a long way from their parents and so forth and that kind of thing. It's about fitness, but actually, of course, what it's about is gathering and bonding and networking. And so these groups have just mushroomed over the last few years. In terms of embracing the other, I think what I would say is, for any faith tradition, go back to your roots. Is there any major faith that does not ask you and me to be kind to the stranger, to embrace the other, to actually do something constructive and loving with your enemies and the people who will either want to persecute you? I mean, all strong classic faith traditions have this. I go a bit further and say that this is about public health and public being. And sometimes to try and sort of encourage, subvert and challenge churches, say, Jesus is the body language of God. Okay? He sees the unseen, he hears the unheard, he touches the untouchable, he searches for people on the margins, and he draws them into the centre. And when you start thinking about your faith tradition as being some kind of body language of God, you're only then really a short step away from asking yourself, well, how do we embody this God that we worship in our community? And it cannot be, and it will not be, trust me, self-serving, self-promoting, and alienating. It will be fundamentally incorporative, and use that word rather than inclusive. Incorporative means it's going to be binding people into itself who are not necessarily going to join and are not necessarily even going to thank you for what you're providing them. But a faith community that isn't incorporative and outward-facing, and in some sense the body language of the God that it actually owes its origins to, is becoming, or on the way to becoming, an exclusive sect. And yeah, I mean, I would just say faith traditions are outward-facing, incorporative, and highly networked.
What we heard from the speakers was rightly so, very somber and faith-oriented. Personally, I think humor has a huge role to play, to make connections. It is really the conversation starter. Make a joke, and then it says, talk to me. What are your views on that?
The question was about humour. I completely agree with you. One of my colleagues is a stand-up comic, and he teaches at Vicar School the what sermon writing can learn from stand-up comedy. So I guess I would partly include that in what I was saying about arts-based, because to me arts-based is all sorts of different things. But yeah, I can only agree with you. I think humour is a way in which we make actually surprising and unexpected connections at its best.
I would say heaven is a laugh free forever. And so one of the essences of humour is being able to not take yourself too seriously, and therefore as a consequence of that, it's got a lot of proper sort of humility about it. It's about being earthed and grounded and realising actually it doesn't all rest on you. Some years ago now, I wrote a perfectly serious scholarly article for a journal on the serious purposes of humour in religious traditions. This will be a nice little kind of laugh you on the segue into a break, really. I think we would all agree that actually, basically, the sort of book of Jewish humour runs to several volumes, does it not? I mean, you know, fantastically funny and self-deprecating. The book of Catholic jokes is pretty big. The book of Anglican jokes, a little bit thinner, but very, very funny. Book of Brethren jokes, tiny, tiny, tiny pamphlet, because there are faith traditions that don't like laughter. They think it's too embodied, it's too feeling. And I would say laughter is a really important way of connecting into communities. I'm fond of sometimes saying, you know, that faiths are all about how the faithful try and capture the mood of God. And if you think God can have a laugh at humanity, and I do, then you'll get your cue from humour there, really.